Roselle. I'm the Education Director with NOFA-Mass, and I'm the project lead for our NRCS Conservation Innovation Grant. We are in the second year of the project. This project involves NOFA-Mass, NOFA-Connecticut, and NOFA-New Jersey. So I am here today at Ironbound Farm. We just took a soil health assessment at the farm soil here, and this project really centers on both the data collection that we're doing today, but also on the practices that the farmers in the project are using to enhance their soil health, build carbon in the soil, and enhance farm climate resilience and viability. So today I'm here at Ironbound Farm with Alex Giuseppe, the farm manager. We're in Asbury, New Jersey, and we, like I said, we've just conducted a data collection and some filming of Alex's practices.
Hello, my name is Alex Giuseppe. I'm the farm manager and partner here at Ironbound Farm in Hunterdon County, New Jersey. Just to give you a background of what our farm consists of, we're a 108-acre property. We're a diversified operation that has 10 acres of dwarfed apple trees for cider production. We have 12 acres of annual vegetables. We have half an acre of covered low tunnels and high tunnels for year-round production. We have a plethora of different types of birds that we graze in our silvopastured orchard that we just put in this past season. And we do also a bunch of perennial infusion berries and fruits to get also mixed into our cider. On the farm, we have a tasting room. So we kind of have a restaurant that runs half of the week seasonally. So a lot of the produce that we're producing is for that outlet directly on site, and as well as making value-added food products that we sell through our kitchen and through our on-site farm store. We have a 100-member CSA that we started on this property this year. We also sell to a farmer's market in Philadelphia, and we work with a few large wholesale distributors in the New York area, and also another wholesale delivery for restaurants in central New Jersey that services 150 restaurants in the tri-state area. Right behind us is our early spring field where we have beets, Swiss chard, kale, collards, all of our cole crops, and some radishes and carrots. This is one of our 4 fields that we plant in like a block row crop system. As I mentioned before, we also have 15 acres of silvopastured orchard with apples in it. And there our trees are planted on a 30-foot center, so we can alley crop annual crops between that, like sweet potatoes, winter squash, potatoes, and melons. And then we also have another section of that where we rotate meat birds through. So we have about 600 broiler chickens that we do every year, as well as 250 turkeys that we move through that system as well.
So what we're looking at here is a really nice example of rhizosheathing. You can see particularly in this root and this root here, we have really strong association between the plant root and the soil ecology, or the rhizosphere. When you have soil clinging strongly to the roots like this so that the root is entirely covered, that's one of the soil health indicators we're looking for. It's called rhizosheathing. The other thing to notice about this is that the soil is, the plant is holding on to these aggregates really well. And we also are seeing some of the compost that's been mixed into the soil that's showing up, holding on to the roots, and nice healthy root structure.
I am Mike Rasweiler from North Slope Farm in Hunterdon County, New Jersey. The idea had always been to develop a farm that would be respectful of the concept of permaculture, where you're investing in a permanent agricultural system that's going to be self-sustaining, rejuvenating. We focused on vegetables and flowers for a cash crop. Reducing tillage has come to our attention as we've learned more about soil life and healthy soil. So it's been our interest to reduce tillage, mostly because of the concern for disturbing and breaking down the soil. We've seen a lot of soil erosion on farms that are just bare tilled. So the goal is to just disturb less soil.
This is Scott Morgan. We're here at Organix Family Farm. Our farm, we grow small grains. I do lots of different kinds of grain. I do mostly market sales, so I go direct to customers the same way that most growers are doing CSAs with vegetables. So right now we're standing in the rye field that is part of the soil health grant that we're doing with the NOFA-New Jersey, NOFA-Mass and NOFA-Connecticut. This field hasn't seen tillage in about 1.5 years. We started with a winter wheat 2 years back. Last year this just got mowed and taken care of on the surface. So we harvested the winter wheat and then we mowed it all summer long and then planted the rye, which is also a winter grain. So that it grows and survives and develops over the winter time. You can see that not tilling, we've got some perennial weeds coming in, but we've also fostered a lot of clover. So right in front of us is some crimson clover that's coming up. This will all get mowed down. All this stubble will get mowed down with a flail mower here within the next week or so. The flail mower chops everything up into really small pieces. So it's going to leave the ground completely mulched. We'll have 100% soil coverage, and yet everything will be fine enough and in a uniform enough layer that the clover and some of the other stuff that we want to continue to grow will be able to come up through it. It's also fine enough and thin enough that I will be able to drill directly into it, effectively no-till, even though it's a standard soybean special grain drill. I've got it kind of set up for maximum pressure, and I find that I can cut through all that plant residue as long as it's chipped up really fine the way that the flail mower does. So we will drill buckwheat right into this stubble after it's mowed down and get at least 1 round, if not 2 rounds of buckwheat, just to keep nutrient cycling and up near the surface on all this. And then as we get closer to winter, I'll make a decision whether to plant a final round of buckwheat and leave all that residue up at the top, or whether I'll just leave it alone and try to get in here nice and early with some oats next spring. If it's looking nice and clean and the buckwheat's done its job to keep the grasses under control, then what we're going to do is we're going to do our 3rd year on this grant with no-tilled oats into this as early as we can in the spring.
And here we're establishing clover, and we try to maintain clover. And in the process of managing this production bed, the end result is we want to have clover established. So we reduce tillage by not plowing up the whole field. All we do is we rip a furrow down the middle of where the bed would be. We apply compost, and we lightly rototill the surface to mix the compost with the soil that's come up. We're not tilling the pathways. In a lot of cases, like you can see over there, there's still standing clover in the pathways. So if we start with a well cover-cropped field with vigorous beneficial cover crop, then we rip a furrow, we add compost, we get it ready for planting, we plant the crop, and then as the plant grows, we need to then try to control any weeds that happen. So there is a little bit more tillage that happens here with just on the surface with a thing called a power harrow, which rotates like this, disturbing the soil, the surface of the soil, but not too deep. And when the soil conditions are right, we take the opportunity to plant an extra cover crop that will then fill this in with clover, and we won't need to do any extra tillage after production to establish our cover crop.
Part of my role is actually to come out to the farm, participating in the project, and do a soil health evaluation at each site and record data about the farm's soil health indicators. The soil health indicators that we are using are the NOFA-Mass carbon proxy tests, which we have recently revised for 2020 to bring them into harmony with the NRCS 2020 field assessment protocols and field soil health assessment worksheet. So our protocols now closely mirror the NRCS official protocols, which helps us to have data exchangeability with NRCS and helps us to provide data that's useful to farmers who are wanting to apply for programs like EQIP and conservation stewardship programs through NRCS. So one thing I'm seeing here is with this grass, we're seeing a lot of strong association between the aggregates and the grass roots here. If we drop that on the soil, on the shovel, I mean, we don't lose a lot of the aggregates off of it. It's holding on pretty well to those aggregates there. Definitely seeing some nice granular structure here, although it's a little bit soil's a little bit less aggregated than it was in the big garden. It's a little bit. I'm seeing a little bit more loose soil here than I did over there, and that might have to do with the power harrow or some of the machinery that's used out here. Seeing some sections that are a little bit massive there, but when you break them apart, they still have tons of great pore space in there, so they really only look that way initially. And when you break them apart, you see there's lots of really nice pore space and roots running through, and see the way they break apart with lots of surface area. So this is actually nice. This is structure. This does have soil structure. So one of the things that I see a lot here at Mike's farm is the marbled appearance of light and dark in the soil, which is a really good sign. It sort of indicates that the subsoil and topsoil is being mixed biologically rather than through tillage. In a tilled soil, you typically, like an aggressively plowed soil, you typically see a brighter line between the subsoil and the topsoil, but here you can see this these darker mottled appearance between the lighter appearance, and that's sort of to me that's a sign of biological blending of the soil layers. All right, so this test is the penetrometer reading. This is a simple Agritronics penetrometer. It's a really handy tool. What it tells you is the pounds per square inch of pressure that are required to push the tip of the penetrometer into the soil. It can give you an idea of where you might have a compaction layer and how hard your soil is generally. So I usually take 3 readings. So this is our test site is kind of disturbed. We're going to do it not where we've already dug up the soil. We're going to do it on this side. And I'm going to take 3 readings. I usually offer farmers that I do technical support for, I offer them an average of 3 readings. All right, so we are going to take the pressure at each of these 3-inch lines. 150, 180, 250, 260, 300, 300, 300, still over 300. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
It's easier when someone else is taking the measurement.
Some of the things that we do to reduce tillage is we try to implement a permanent raised bed system in our block fields like this. So all of our tractors are spec'd out to have 66.5-inch centers, which allows us to very easily flip a few beds if we need to into another crop with just doing a light renovation. So when we start our field prep, we use a spader that is a conservation tillage machine that works very slowly and allows the soil to break at its natural breaking point and have a diversity of aggregation in it. It moves very, very slowly, and you need a tractor that has a creeper gear that could go to about 0.2 miles per hour in order for that to operate the way that it's supposed to. Once we use that, we will spread any amendments, whether it's mushroom compost, chicken manure, worm castings, or some different rock powders and minerals, depending on what the soil tests are telling us. And then after that, we use a Buckwheat Bed shaper So in our initial bed forming in the beginning of the season, it's just 2 different discs and a bed pan that makes our permanent raised bed. And that incorporates whatever amendments we added, and gives us a nice flat level top that we can use our transplanters to get crops in the ground or to direct seed. And then once we flip the bed, we remove those hillers from it, and we put a few S-tine shanks that we set very high, so it just crumbles the top 2 or 3 inches of the soil, not doing another deep tillage again. So it just gives us a fresh start that we can work the surface of the soil without having to do another deep tillage in that season. As far as for when we're putting cover crop down, we'll do a scalping mow of our beds. And sometimes if it's a crop, for instance, like potatoes or sweet potatoes, we're running a root digger where we have really uneven soil. We'll use a Perfecta harrow to kind of re-level it out so we get good seed to soil contact for cover crop. But we're trying to reduce the amount of deep tillage whenever we can. Another tool that we use to help loosen up any compaction that we might have is a yeoman's plow, which is a keyline plow. So this has a series of 5 shanks that are 2 inches wide that can be set as deep as 40 inches into the soil. And the whole boot is kind of shaped like Italy, and it basically ruptures in the subsoil without mixing the subsoil with the topsoil. And what that does is it creates a nice deep air pocket that roots can now go deep into the soil and help release any locked up nutrients in the subsoil and bring it up to the topsoil. It also helps with any erosion issues that we might have, because all of our farming on this property is done on contour. So now as the water is moving down the soil profile, it hits all of these deep, very narrow channels and will repercolate and go deep into the soil. So those are kind of the 3 main implements that we use on the property to help reduce the amount of tillage that we're doing here.
All right. So I'm going to start with the infiltration test, which is a really quick and easy test that farmers can do to kind of get a sense of how their soil health is doing. Pound it halfway into the soil. You want it to be about 4 inches long. Pound it halfway into the soil and use a piece of plastic. So I like to reuse my plastic a few times so that I'm not contributing too much to the landfill. So I've just got a piece of plastic here in my bag, in my apron. So I'm going for 444 milliliters of water for a 1-inch rainfall simulator in 6 inches. So I'm going to pour that into this. I'm just going to hit start on my cell phone stopwatch as I pull the plastic off. So 1, 2, 3, go. Stop. Great. So 16 seconds. Now this soil has a fair amount of clay in it, so that's a good number for clayey soils. We're looking for under 30 seconds. For really sandy soil, we're actually looking for under 10 seconds as like kind of big like peak soil health. But yeah, soils that have more clay in them are going to be a little slower. So 16 seconds is really good.
Oh, it's starting to smell like dog poop. So this is an earlier planting of buckwheat. This is what that rye field will look like here in a couple of weeks as soon as I get it mowed down and planted. You may be able to see the enormous profusion of pollinators and beneficial insects that buckwheat attracts. It's got real nice small flowers when it's been raining. It's got lots of nectar for the bees. When it hasn't been raining, it's a good pollen source. This is quickly approaching the point where it wants to be cut down unless you want to have a weed problem. So you can see it's setting seed, those triangular pods. When those start to go from green, like this one, to brown, they then turn black, and once they've turned all the way dark, they're hard seed and they'll resprout. So this is the point where you really want to mow this buckwheat down. And if you need more time under cover, just replant. It's usually about 6 weeks at peak summer. It's about 6 weeks from the time you plant until the time you really need to mow it down.
Okay, so this is our Buckwheat Bed former. This is probably one of my favorite implements that we have on the farm because of its versatility. We've done everything from make furrows to plant apple trees to do all of our bed prep in the beginning of the season, as well as bed renovation for second plantings. There's also abilities to put a plastic mulch lifter on this, bury drip tape, undercutter bars, everything. So I highly recommend this setup to anyone. But what we primarily use it for as far as vegetables go is for our to make our permanent raised beds that we use. So after we use the spader, which is the implement that I just showed you guys, this is what we'll use to make our beds. So you have these two shanks that you set up centered on your tractor tires, and it loosens up your tire tracks and throws soil to the inside. Depending on how high we want our bed for the crop, you could also put little discs in here to make a bigger mound in the middle. And then we have this bed pan on the back end that presses and makes a really level seed bed that works perfect if we're using our mechanical transplanter or our water wheel transplanter. And then one thing that I like about it the most is that when we're doing a second planting, we'll put these S-tine shanks on the frame, and then this will just crumble the surface and kind of loosen it up without having to do a deep tillage a second time in the season. And then it will allow us to renovate the bed without doing any sort of deep incorporation of the soil and destruction of the aggregation that we made from that initial tillage in the beginning of the season.
So just want to show you guys a couple of the pieces of equipment that we're using on the farm. When we do need to commit deep tillage, this is about as deep as we go. It's a relatively heavy set of discs, especially when I run it folded up. So right now it's about 9 feet wide, completely unfolded. It's about 14. I've found that it's a little bit too intense for in terms of beating up the soil. So we only use it when we really have to. If the residue is too heavy, too thick, or if it's the first time into a field in a long time. Super old, super rusty. The discs still go around, so it still works. So this next piece of equipment is a Perfecta, a series of heavy springs with what's called a duck foot shovel on the bottom. It's a nice wide foot. The way that the springs are offset in the 3 rows, I get almost 100% soil coverage as I go through. The advantage here is that I can sweep very shallow in the soil profile. I can keep the disturbance of the soil right up at the surface. So I'm really just mixing in residue, really just prepping the top inch or 2 that I need to plant seed in, and I can leave all those other strata undisturbed so that the soil health and biology can continue to function and behave the way it wants to. It leaves, with that heavy roller on the back, it leaves a nice crumbly tilth on the soil, great for seeding into. This is our springtime weeder. We go in usually blind after we've seeded. Before the crop is even up, you can go in and this just scratches the surface. So anything that's germinated in the seed bed works best on really tiny, the thread root stage of the weed. So when they're really vulnerable, it just kind of scratches the surface and leaves stuff exposed to bake in the sun, but it doesn't work so deep that it would disturb your seed. With crops like wheat, oats, rye, and so far even the chickpeas, I've been able to go over a couple of times pre-germination and even 1 or 2 times after without damaging the crop too much, and eliminating 75 to 80% of my weed pressure that way. And so this last piece of equipment that we're looking at is the flail mower. So this one's about 8 foot wide. It's got the shovels that you can see underneath on a spinning drum. And it just chips everything up and leaves it in a nice 8 foot wide strip instead of the classic brush hog going around in a circle, leaves everything laying out on one side and relatively long. But the way this works with these rakes in there, it holds all the material in until it's chipped fine enough to flow out through through this gap. So it's chipping everything down to about 6 or 8 inches long. So what I want to show you guys here is some of what it would look like after the flail mower goes through. So this is just hay, mixed grass, and weeds, to be honest, but we manage it with cutting. It's just a bit slopey for us, so we're not cropping it right now. But I've taken that, 3.5, almost 4 foot high grass in a single pass at a slow speed with the flail mower, and we're left with nice small bits of the straw and grass, and you can see 100% soil coverage. You cannot see soil down here. But it's also uniform enough that this side was cut a week ago, and you can see that the grass is coming up no problem. The grass has got enough space to come through. This was just cut maybe a day or 2 ago as I was on my way back from the back of the farm. I just did a pass. You can see it's a little brighter, a little more hay colored. But this is what you want. You want it uniform soil coverage, but still enough space for the for young new plants to grow.
So the test to any agricultural effort is always, are you growing a crop that you can harvest and sell? And these guys didn't get any fertilizer this year, other than the compost, because our soil tests are showing, high soil fertility level from the fertilizer methods we've used in the past. So now the goal is to maintain the health soil, and it's really all about the texture and the biology in the soil is the thing we're learning. So to reduce the tillage is to try to protect the soil environment for the biology, in the hopes that they'll then sustain the system such that we can grow healthy, bounteous crops.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Carol, and everyone else for coming out to the farm today. It's been a great honor to be a part of this grant for the past 2 years and going on 3 soon. It's been a really great opportunity for me as a farmer to have access to a grant like this, because I'm getting a soil health analysis done by Caro every season, so I could look and see where we started in our first year and how implementing these reduced tillage practices are enhancing the soil, or in some cases maybe worse for certain crops, and just have that data so that we can make more informed decisions. It's also been a great opportunity because I get access to all of the other farms in the Northeast that are participating in the grant. So I can hear about new implements that they're using and methods or battles that they're trying to face, and again, just like try to figure out as a team what we could do to enhance the quality of our soil, sequester more carbon, and just have overall better productivity on our operations.